always kind of coming away where you feel like you could have done one more if you needed to, but you're feeling good about the workout, and you can go tonight to sleep, and you can sleep well, and you can wake up in the morning and you can repeat another good one.
The Triathlon Show 129. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and today I bring you part 2 of my interview with Professor Paul Laursen on interval training. You heard part 1 on Monday, and if you didn't, definitely go back and listen to that one first. We'll jump right back into the interview from where we left off today. And in part 1, I also introduce Paul's background and give you his resume, so to say. So let's get right into the interview after thanking Precision Hydration for sponsoring this episode. As you are probably well aware by now, people lose different amounts of sodium in their sweat. Some people sweat a lot, some people sweat less, and some people have sweat that contains a lot of sodium, and some have lower concentrations of sodium. So your sweat sodium losses in endurance performance is a very individual thing. And that's why Precision Hydration has created a free online sweat test that has been validated against real lab data from sweat testing athletes. And you can take this test on precisionhydration.com, and it will tell you roughly how much sodium you lose in your sweat, and this will also guide your sodium intake in your races, whether you use Precision Hydration or not, but it will give you the exact amount of milligrams of sodium per hour that you should take if you're training or racing. So go to precisionhydration.com, take that free online sweat test, and if you decide to go with Precision Hydration products for your electrolyte needs, which I would highly recommend, then you can get your first box for free when you use the discount code THATTRIATHLONSHOW, all one word, all caps. And again, the website is precisionhydration.com. So let's get right back into the interview with Paul Laursen. That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for many different reasons. But if we talk about something like time in zone, for example, so just to give a concrete example, and let's say we have somebody who's going to do a track workout, and they can choose between doing 10 times 400 with some recovery, or they can do 4 times 1000. So how can time in zone or some other metric or some other thought process help them decide which would be the more beneficial for them to do in that situation?
Yeah, well, again, that's a great one. Great example, because it kind of goes almost back to the short interval versus the long interval type stimulus there. So again, this will depend on the intensity that they do, either those 400s or 1000s. However, the 400 one is a little bit closer to the short interval format that if you've got appropriate recovery durations in between those 400s, it could wind up being a less stressful workout than the 4000s, right? Imagine the thousands you're prolonging that intensity. So you're I guess the 4x1000 would be more like that type 4 workout that we talked about, type 4 target, where it could be.
That was only aerobic? Or?
Well, no, type 4s was the max one. It was kind of like, these are like VO2 max type intervals almost, where that would be, oxidative, anaerobic, and neuromuscular potentially. Whereas the 400s is a little bit more of a short interval. You could create still a type 4 one if you're blasting out those 400s. Don't get me wrong, but if you, maybe even if we brought them down to 300, say, we could get with appropriate recovery between, we could get a little bit more of a lessened neuromuscular and a little bit lessened of a anaerobic glycolytic system there as well. So the example that you've given, that would be one where you, by having those 2 interval workouts in a week, might be more appropriate with having the 2 different ones, as opposed to 2 interval workouts of 4 by 1,000, if you kind of get me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And in that, the 400 was a bit too short. But I guess we could make a comparison of a 3 by a mile workout, and what would it be? 6 times 800. I think that adds up to be the same distance, 4,800 meters of work.
Yep.
And then you could have, both would be long intervals. And so I can give you like how I've been thinking about this up until now, for quite some time at least. I want to get as much aerobic adaptation as possible. So I would, maybe, if the athlete is advanced enough and can pace the miles well, I would probably pick the mile, because I know that they will spend a larger proportion of the time in the right zone. Their total time in heart rate zone 5 will be higher. So my thinking has been that I can get more of a stimulus for the VO2 max type aerobic system with that workout, which is my goal for that workout. But on the other hand, I haven't really considered like the potential difference in recovery between the 2 types of workouts. So what would your thought process be with those 2 similar type of interval workouts, but different interval length of the 2 workouts, and slightly different recoveries then, I guess?
Yeah, it's an awesome question, and again, so many ways to skin a cat when it comes to training. We really have to always kind of start back with the person that we have in front of us, and so I'm just thinking with I know what you were going at with the VO2 max type philosophy. There's this philosophy that the more time you spend at your VO2 max, the more you are able to enable that adaptation, which is great thinking. The problem, however, is that in some individuals, that is almost we find that to be kind of too stressful, sort of thing. So what you've suggested with the longer miles, that might work out great for certain individuals, but on another individual, that might be overly stressful. And the name of the game in for any athlete is training consistency. So if we go back to first principles, we really want to be nailing as many sessions as we can, ideally, because then we're enabling that the frequency of the stimulus in the cells of the body to be kind of consistent, and that's one of the main principles we want to do. So if a person's built up to what you're suggesting, that's great. But if, on the other hand, if they're just starting up, they might not kind of be able to handle that I guess highly stressful workout that you've suggested. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Michael, but
it does again tell us that it really depends, and you need to take the whole context into account, of course, and that's where knowing the athlete that you coach becomes integral. Or if you're self-coach, really knowing yourself and what you can handle. I guess one thing that one thing that came to mind during your answer was that, should athletes in general like do interval workouts so that they're completely knackered, they had nothing left to give at the end of it, they felt like they got 100% of what they had in them done at the end of the last interval? Or should they have like 1 or maybe 2 intervals left in them that they could have done? Or should they do a mix? What's your philosophy on that?
That could be the most important point that's made throughout the entire interview, Michael, and that's it's kind of more. I think it was more the latter suggestion that you had, where you don't want to be buggered at the end. You always want to feel like you could have done more. You should always be leaving that workout. If it's if it feels too stressful, it probably is. Like that's
Feeling too stressful though, that's maybe not the correct way to frame it, because for some athletes, like really going to the well on a regular basis is they thrive on it. At least they think they do. They don't necessarily do it, but they think that that's what they need to do. Really go all out all the time, or at least every time they go to the track or they have a hard trainer workout or something like that. So that's kind of, so I guess that what you're saying, it might be too stressful, even if you feel that you've given it your absolute all and you didn't have any interval left in you. For some, that might be a feeling of victory, a great feeling, but it might still be too stressful. Or am I reframing that wrong? But that's kind of what I got from that.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming down to the individual. There's probably individuals that they're incredibly resilient, but there's also a lot of individuals that will, they'll just unfortunately go with that. They'll feel like they're thriving on it, and they will. I've done this myself. You push yourself just that little bit too far, and you either cause an injury or you are buggered for the next day. And again, remember, training consistency is probably the most. Getting back and doing that next session that's on your plate. That's probably one of the key factors that's going to elicit the best adaptation in the long run towards the key event. So for me, what's worked for me, and again, we're all individual coaches and whatnot out there, and most of the athletes that are coming to me are highly, highly motivated. If I told them to go to the well every time, they would. But unfortunately, when I've done that prescription, the people that I've been training tend to help create an injury in them, and that's I've learned the hard way that. For me, just that always kind of coming away where you feel like you could have done one more if you needed to, but you're feeling good about the workout, and you can go tonight to sleep, and you can sleep well, and you can wake up in the morning and you can repeat another good one. But again, that's my context.
No, we're on the same page. I just wanted to, because you said that if it feels too stressful, but I just think that for some athletes, because I at least used to be one of them, it wouldn't feel too stressful to go to the well, but it probably was, because I've also had a lot of injury problems in the past, and I know athletes that are the exact same way. So getting that picture, or that picture in your mind that you should have the ability to do one or two more at the end of the workout is a great one to have, because I agree with that, but I just think that not all athletes will feel that it's too stressful to actually go all out. They will feel that they're doing the right thing even though it is too stressful. That's the distinction that I was trying to make.
Yeah, no, it's a great distinction, and it's a big issue in the world of like CrossFit's gone crazy, and that whole movement, right? With high intensity interval training, and this is another chapter. It's actually written by my colleague Phil Maftone, and many of the listeners might know, and it's really on athlete health with respect to interval training, and that's the take home message at the end of the day. We need to recognize that this high intensity interval training is it's a stress, and it's a good stress used the right way, but it can also the two-edged sword. If we go to the absolute well, balls out right to the max of our ability, that's a heavy stress on the body. And you couple that with the other stressors that are in individuals' lives, and it's probably the main reason for the so-called overtraining syndrome or the manifestation of an injury.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, I guess, one of the main ways that you can make sure that you recover enough by having a little bit left in you at the end of the workout. But are there other ways that we can manipulate interval workouts to kind of make it slightly easier to recover from?
Yeah. So I guess that really kind of comes back to the short interval stuff that I mentioned. And again, I think, and you highlighted this too, whereas this is not a format that's used a lot, but if you want to it's for the listeners out there, the coaches out there. You might want to start considering incorporating a little bit of short interval work in your prescriptions, and that's because if we're breaking those intervals into shorter bout durations at high intensity, and separating those with appropriate gaps, again, you're creating in general a less stressful workout, and that's again a way to still achieve high intensity in a session, but not have it be quite as I guess excessive and off-putting as a long interval VO2 max type of set.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be my other one. The other thing we could do, we mentioned this as one of the other different ways you can skin the cat. It's having like a period of like submaximal recovery. So you could separate about a number of different short intervals, right? So for example, you could do, say, for example, 30 on, 30 offs and you could do 6 to 8 of them, and then separate those 6 to 8 30 on, 30 offs by a 5-minute or 10-minute bout of easy spinning or light jogging or whatever. And then you do another series of those. So that's another way to skin the cat, keep stress a little bit more at bay, but still get a great stimulus.
And one more variable that I want to talk about is kind of the modality, if you want to call it that, of the training. For example, doing intervals on the track or on a flat road versus on a hill, or on an indoor trainer versus outdoors, on the hills or on the flats on the bike, that sort of thing. Is that something that we know a lot about? And what do we know if that's the case?
Yeah, I don't think we know too much about that from the research. There's not a whole lot of studies that look at that too much. It's a bit more anecdotal, a bit more coachy. But I like to really switch things around a lot from a coaching standpoint on the mode. So let's just talk about, maybe we'll talk running specific, for example. So I would like to manipulate my intervals so that they are a few are even off-road. Some are done on the track. Big mistake I've made on the track is not reminding athletes to turn the other way, and had athletes develop ITB syndrome because they're just going around the track on one direction. So make sure you're switching those around the track. Having them on a flat road, often program those specific to the event that's coming up. So if I know a little bit about the course, then I might want to have those potentially on have those course specific. If it's an Xterra athlete, then they're being done in the trails or on a kind of a course specific almost, if we know the course profile. And yeah, I think those are probably the main considerations. And hills as well, like having some hills in there as well, so that there's almost hill repeats are absolutely fantastic. But and then again, here is why we don't prescribe at an absolute speed, but we're prescribing at a feel, right? So get the athlete to do this, either a long interval or a short interval, but done on a hill. And again, it's another great way to build leg strength and get a super workout.
Yeah, I like hill repeats a lot as well, because they, as you say, you build strength, you get a bit more recruitment that way potentially, and it's also less impact, less risk of injury on the run, at least compared to going to the track or on the road. But I actually watched your colleague Martin's videos yesterday, so I have it in fresh memory that there was one study. It's only one study, so I'm not saying it's conclusive or anything, but when they measured the time spent at VO2 max intensity with an identical hill interval workout versus a track workout, the track workout was quite significantly better in terms of the time at intensity. So that was pretty interesting. I had no idea that would be the case.
Yeah, that was the French study. I do recall that one. I think that's one of the only ones we kind of found on that one. So yeah, again, if you're if you're going to throw all your eggs in the basket of time at VO2 max, then absolutely you want to keep it kind of specific to that. So I guess one of the principles that I really like, that I kind of tend to follow, is this. Yeah, I don't know. I just tend to see benefits with variety of the stimulus, and I think I don't know if it's necessarily from a physiological standpoint, but almost even from a mental standpoint. From some of the athletes that I coach, they like to see things, things are changing up a little bit from time to time. So that's why I like to go back and forth between those two. But you make a great point that I think you'll get the greatest VO2 stimulus from flat terrain, and again, there's strong evidence from that study that you mentioned, the French study.
So let's talk about the case study that we teased a bit earlier, and that's an athlete that you coach, Kyle Buckingham, who recently won Ironman South Africa. So congratulations for that first, and then take it away. What do you want to tell us about his training and how what we discussed today so far has helped him achieve that kind of success?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's all Kyle, of course, but man, it was fun to be a part of that, and almost a career highlight from my standpoint. And maybe I just from the outside, I just got to say it's been an absolute pleasure to coach Kyle, and really feel blessed that our paths crossed. And who knows why it's anything like this kind of works, but it just does. And I think we're going to see a lot more from Kyle in the coming years, especially in the Ironman world, as he goes through his mid-30s. It's just right in the prime time to reap the benefits of the work that he's done. And I guess to coin a Simon Whitfield phrase, Kyle is really a student of the sport, and that's what makes him such a and that's why it's so enjoyable to kind of coach him. I met Kyle after Kona, and he was kind of in that stage where his GI system was really letting him down in races, and he was getting that carbohydrate intolerance or whatever, and just those of us that do Ironman know how the gut can kind of really take us out of the game sometimes, and he was going through that. And I think he wasn't aware of the LCHF kind of benefits. I know you've had Tim Noakes and stuff on your podcast before, and
I have to be completely honest. I'm not a big fan of LCHF, but I want to bring all sides of the all different perspectives to the audience. So, but
great. Well, again, for sure, it's probably not for everyone, but Kyle's one of those guys where he definitely he benefited from that. It was kind of he was able to throw away, I guess, those large 90 grams per hour kind of carb amounts, and it was just able to kind of bring that down to a more manageable type, less than 60 grams per hour, and that's he was just basically able to kind of run free a little bit more. So that was probably the biggest factor. He's got a big post on Slow Twitch. He talks all a bit about that. So
what was the change in diet to an LCHF? What allowed him to do that, to go to? And did you measure his fat burning capability, and how much did that improve as part of that process?
Well, we didn't actually, we didn't get him up to any metabolic carts or anything. So we didn't get him before and after, but I've seen enough in the lab and through athletes that I'm pretty well aware of what kind of goes on and what happens. And I think the main litmus test is, Kyle's able to kind of go, he can do an 8-hour ride with, just on water, right? Fasted in water. There's not a lot of guys that can kind of do that, right? And he'll rock out 210 watts for 8 hours on a long ride. So you can only do that if your fat oxidation is super max.
Yeah,
and that's what it is. So he's full keto to start, and like all of us in the beginning, he was a little bit of a doubter and stuff, but we got him there after about 5-6 weeks, I think, and And then, yeah, he kind of hasn't looked back, and he's what, he talks all about it. It's no secret or anything. And it really, really works for him. So that was the main one. But then I think really, I guess coming back to interval training, that's, after we got the baseline, fat oxidation level just humming and completely high, we kind of lost sight, I think, a little bit of the top end. And that's where it was nice to kind of bring interval training back into that and really start to work on more of the top end with Kyle, with some of these short intervals and long intervals, and just getting a good frequency of that. And then I guess, again, to bring interval training and LCHF in together and periodized carbs, it's like, and there's a lot of really good work on the periodization of more your macronutrients. And yet now it's like, it's more carbohydrates during the high intensity sessions, but it's LCHF elsewhere.
Yeah, no, and that's super fascinating, and this it ties in nicely with what we've been discussing all along, that what type of interval training as well you do depends so much on the individual and the context, and the same is definitely true for nutrition, and this has absolutely worked for Kyle. It's clear, as you say, he won and he can do those sorts of rides. That's super impressive. And from my standpoint, just to clarify it for you, I think the listeners are well aware, I'm not necessarily pro anything. I'm just more, I guess, against the fads that are popping up, and I know that you're not one to fall into fads with your background, but I think that for people that more so turn to the general popular media, it can be easy to be too narrow-sighted. And two key terms that you mentioned there were periodization and individualization. I think that's something that's super important in nutrition as well as in training. So what you say there with cycling carbs for the high intensity workouts, that's makes a ton of sense. And it's interesting to hear how somebody can do those sort of intervals still on a ketogenic diet, because that's something that we still, I guess it's still so new that we haven't really seen a lot about it. But for him, do you think that he can, with adding those carbs for interval workouts, he can hit them the same way that he used to before going on that diet? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, so we just got it's a great point you make. Totally. I mean, for sure. Hey, if there's money to be made, right, people are going to make it. So they're going to try to make it. So there's lots popping up. I mean, it was the same. It was the same in the carb days as well, right? So it's like it's just kind of shifted. So I don't think you can blame anyone or anything. But that's, I think it's we definitely both agree. It's individuals. Try things out for yourself. What works for you? Give things a good chance. Don't try to fall into fads. As best you can, but also at the same time, don't be afraid to give something a try for a long time as well. I think especially with that, the LCHF one, if you do it right, it can. It comes down to the individual. So, but again, I think the thing with Kyle in his case, he gave it long enough of a chance to see the benefit.
How long would you say it took for him to adapt to it to 95% level or so?
Yeah, I think it probably took him 4 to 6 weeks being there. He started to feel it around 4 to 6 weeks. And the real litmus test that the triathletes out there will know is try your long ride on the weekend, try it fasted, and just see how long you can kind of go without just have a water or a black coffee in the morning, and then just see how long you can kind of go without really getting that bonk kind of feeling. And the longer you can go, whether that be 1.5 to 3 hours to 4 and 5 hours without feeling hungry, the more you're on to something kind of thing, right? So Kyle's got up at the extreme end. He's got that up to 8 hours. So I would try that kind of first. And again, to answer your question, it took him but it took him about maybe 6 weeks to kind of get to a decent level where he's probably going for 4.5, 5 hours. And then we've, over the last 2 years, we've pushed that out to 8 hours.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
So it's time to start wrapping this thing up. It's been super fascinating, and as we kind of talked about in the pre-interview chat, this will become 2 episodes for sure. But I want to finish up with some rapid-fire questions that you should answer in just one sentence or so, 15 seconds or less. And the first of these is, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to triathlon or endurance sports?
Sure. So, to be honest, there probably isn't a book per se. I'm mostly into journals myself. Like PubMed is my resource because I'm a geeky scientist. And I would also, I'd follow Twitter, and I looked at my various following on Twitter and stuff. Tends to have lots of interesting things that I follow. And then podcasts as well would be the other thing that are that are awesome. I encourage everyone to listen to podcasts. And some of the other podcasts that I like to listen to would be STEM Talk, a good science one, then Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, and Waking Up with Sam Harris.
What's a personal habit that's helped you achieve success?
Good one. Yeah. The maybe routine is a big one, and just doing my best to practice what I preach as best I can. So trying to prioritize the things that I know will help facilitate my health, like my nutrition, my sleep, exercise, and time with family and friends.
Good one. And what do you wish you had known or wish you had done differently at some point in your career? It can be triathlon or professional, academic, sure. Anything.
Well, I think I remember back to the interview, almost thinking that when you got there in the interview, and it was around that the interval stuff, where that was one of the things where I went to the well too often on my training. I wish I'd had a coach that kind of guided me a little bit better to tell me not to do that, and because I got injured too much. And I got overtrained too much, and I would have been nice to see if maybe I had a little bit more in me than I was ever able to actually get to on the in the performance sort of level.
All right, Paul, this has been absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so thought-provoking and giving me a lot to think about, and I'm looking forward to your book for sure. When can we expect your book to be out, by the way? Great.
Well, we've got a provisional date that's from Human Kinetics Publishers of December 19th, but they're entitled to change that according to various different things. But that's when we're expected to have it out. There'll be a website as well that Martin and I will put up. I encourage people to check that out there. It'll have different ways to interact because this is we want to grow the area and the understanding in it as well, and that'll be titled HIIT-Science.com. So HIIT science.com. So it's not up yet, but it's being worked at behind the scenes.
Cool. And we'll definitely have you or Martin or both of you on again around the time of the book launch to discuss more, because it's as we found out through this long chat, something that we can talk a lot about, and we're still just scratching the surface. Anything else that you want to mention before we close off this interview? Like, where can people follow you and keep up to date with what you've got going on?
Yeah, again, that website eventually will be the place to go. Give me a couple months for us to kind of get that up. There's lots of exciting things that'll be happening on that. I won't reveal them just now. And yeah, I'll keep people up to date just on my Twitter account, which is Paul B. Laursen, at Paul B. Laursen.
Great. We'll link to that in the show notes. Okay, thanks again, Paul. It was really a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Oh, awesome. It was my pleasure. Great chat. Thank you so much, Michael.
All right, so there you have it. I will give you my key takeaways for this entire two-part series today, since we didn't do that last time. And I guess one of the most important things that I took away, something that I think about a lot actually, in what's the right way to do it. I'm not saying that there is a right or a wrong way, but hearing Paul's take on it was very, very useful, and that is to do the interval workouts that you do such that you maybe leave one interval left in you. Don't go completely to the well every single time, because that might just be too big a stress. So that was an important one, I feel. And then just a quick summary for the types of interval training that we discussed. You have 3 different systems, and they are the aerobic or oxidative system, the anaerobic or glycolytic system, and then the neuromuscular or musculoskeletal system. And depending on how you combine what sort of stimulus you give your body, you have 6 different types of intervals. So one type is just focusing on the aerobic system. Then you have the aerobic system plus a neuromuscular stimulus would be a type 2 interval. You could have an aerobic plus anaerobic type interval. You could have aerobic plus anaerobic plus neuromuscular, and that would be a type 4 interval that we talked a little bit about as well. And then a type 5 would be a peripheral aerobic plus anaerobic system. And then finally, something that Paul also mentioned is it's a different type of training, but neuromuscular, focusing just on the neuromuscular side, would be a 6th type of intervals. And finally, another thing that I consider very interesting was the short intervals, and Paul pointing out that this is maybe underutilized in triathlon, because you can create great stimuli for whatever system you are targeting without necessarily causing as much stress on, for example, let's say the anaerobic system or even neuromuscular system that may make the workouts much harder to recover from. So by knowing these different types of intervals and how to play around with the different variables that we discussed, then you can design interval workouts that are going to give you the stimulus that you're looking for the system that you're looking for, but without causing undue stress that you're not looking for at this point in time. So this is something that we could have talked for hours and hours about. Of course, we just barely scratched the surface here, so we'll definitely talk about this again in the future on this podcast, but I would still recommend that anybody who is interested in this and wants to be better at coaching or coaching themselves, if they're a self-coach athlete, go and get Paul's and Martin's book when it is released. And I'll definitely keep you posted on that on this podcast. As usual, you can find the show notes for this episode on thattriathlonshow.com. Any comments or questions, leave them on that show notes page and I'll get back to you right away. In the next episode, I will try to get you another age group case study on what it takes to qualify for Kona. So I'm doing the interview tomorrow, and fingers crossed that it actually happens and we don't have any technical issues, because we had that last time when we were trying to make it. But I'm hoping that everything is sorted now. So in that case, you will have that on the next episode. Thank you to Precision Hydration for sponsoring this episode. You can find them on precisionhydration.com, and when you take the free online sweat test, not only will you find out how much sodium you lose in your sweat, but you will also get a complete race strategy all the way from the lead up to the race, preloading with electrolytes, and then to what to do within the race and even after the race in terms of replenishing your electrolyte stores. So it's definitely worth taking that online sweat test, for even if you just do it for the sake of getting some more information and learning about these things. That's again on precisionhydration.com. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.